Welcome to Eight Sided Freaks. Today is our UFC 302 recap episode, and it is Anthony and myself. And today, we're glossing over the Conor McGregor news. I know that's probably big news to a lot of people, but for two reasons, basically. The first is it's a lot of speculation, and we'd be sitting here talking about a lot of what ifs. Probably more beneficial to wait a week, and then if there's any news, we can talk about it next week. And things are trending in the right direction on that. So looks like we might not even have a cancellation or a cancellation as well. So nothing too bad right now. So if there's anything positive or negative next week, we can talk about it. But right now, news is limited and it's not really worth getting too deep into at the moment. So we're going to focus on UFC 302, and we will start it off right at the main event. Islam Makhachev, Dustin Poirier. This was Dustin's more than likely his last chance at UFC gold, barring some crazy unforeseen events. But it was a close fight, really close fight. One judge had it 2-2 going into 5. The other two judges had it 3-1 Islam. But point was, it was a much closer fight than people expected. I thought it was going to be Islam sub inside the first 2 rounds. It wasn't. So, Anthony, what'd you make of the fight itself and how close it ended up being?
So this one, uh, I got to check. I think I saw the fourth round. I saw most of the first, and then I think it was ground control the whole rest of that first round, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But and then I saw the fifth leading up to the finish. So I was closing, so I didn't get to fully eagle eye it, but it seemed like an amazing fight. All my friends afterwards and all social media, you know, it's to be completely honest, besides a Dustin Poirier win, I mean, it sounds like it was just about the fight that everyone hoped. I think it was probably the most Dustin Poirier way to finish a career. Just show that, he is one of the absolute best, a true entertainer. He has his specific issues he brings to every fighter and the specific heart he brings to every fight. Unfortunately, just not going to be able to win the belt. That's his third time at it. I saw someone posted today like he lost to Islam, obviously Islam, Charles, and Habib. I mean, it's insane to even be able to fight those 3 people, let alone for a championship as well. But I mean, it's tough. I will say what I did like besides as much as if this is his send off, what a great one to end on. I think it really does sum up his career as a fighter. But it was nice, I will say, to see Islam get taken into some deeper water again, like that first fight. And I saw some people saying like, oh, if Islam steamrolled him, he wouldn't have got much credit for it. So I think once again, seeing these a little bit longer fights, more of these wars, it does gives people it makes people respect Islam more even.
Yeah, and one thing that I will say on like how the fight itself went, I thought both guys outperformed the areas that people thought they were going to have struggles. So Poirier's takedown defense, I think Islam finished 5 for 16. That may have been the unofficial they showed during the broadcast. I didn't look at the official afterwards. Doesn't really make much of a difference at this point. But 5 for 16 on the takedowns for Islam, that's like if you're Dustin Poirier, like if you tell me before the fight, Islam's going to go 5 for 16 on takedowns, I'm going to say, if you're Dustin Poirier, you take that. Like, that's a fairly good outcome. And in the striking, I thought Islam did some good work with his hands. It's not like he was putting out a boxing masterclass, but he won. The judges gave him 2 of the judges scored in 3 rounds his way. So that means he won 1 round where there was just purely base striking. And once again, if you would have told me before the fight Islam wins wins a round without landing a takedown, I'd say it's a pretty good outcome for this fight in the striking realm. So I think both guys really outperformed where people thought they were going to be weak. And yeah, like you kind of said, it ended up being a lot closer to the first Volkanovski fight rather than, Dustin's 2 chances at titles. And the Charles fight was a little different, but, for the most part, he struggled a lot in those fights and was taken down and submitted. This fight looked a lot more like the Volkanovski fight for Islam. So it was a very competitive fight, and I give both guys a lot of credit. And I have to give Dustin credit because I've openly, going into this fight and going into his last fight against Saint Denis, I did not think he was going to do very well because I did not think he could grapple with those guys in the slightest. So when he grapples with those guys at a respectable level, got to give him credit. And on the Islam side, that round 5, I mean, great takedown to get to the position to land the Darce choke. Great Darce choke. Great finish from him. So looked great to me. I was very impressed with that fight. That was by far best fight of the night. Got fight of the night. So main event delivered. And one thing that I really have a question about on Islam's side is I wonder if his title reign or chances at championships are going to keep looking like this. It's tough because he gets compared to Habib so often, which is really unfair to him, to be honest. When you go out there and submit Charles Oliveira as easily as he did, a lot of people just assume, it's going to be a steamroll every time he fights. Then he goes out there and has a close first fight with Volk, head kicks him in the second. Now everyone's back to thinking he's steamrolling people again. So I'm really interested to see, where this kind of middle ground settles. Maybe he keeps going up and down, but I'm interested to see, like, next time do we see him? Is it another close fight like this one, or does he steamroll somebody? Like, I think that's, I like either way. I mean, I'm not going to hate on it either way, but I think it's very interesting just based off the expectations versus the realities of every single fight he's been in as a champion.
Yeah, I agree. When you were explaining that too, I was thinking the same thing of that Volk fight. The first one, was amazing. That second one was Volk coming off of the Ilya knockout, correct? And it was because Charles was supposed to fight, and
he was coming off the couch
coming off the couch.
Yeah, and then the
Ilya, the Poirier one was okay. That was one, but it was short notice. Okay, but yeah, so I for the most part, especially maybe leading to the belt, Islam's schedule full of cupcakes a little bit. He didn't have the toughest route to the belt like a lot of people, and I think that's a fair criticism because I was one of the people criticizing that. But I mean, obviously, you look at the names: Volk, Charles, Poirier. It's about as respectable as it gets. But I think for as for as untouchable as Islam's looked, I think this shows. I'm curious too. If you force him to fight the best fighters over and over and over, like maybe there's a war he doesn't end up winning. But then again, I mean, if he continues, and I'm sure, yeah, I can't imagine however many names they give him. I'm sure he is phenomenal. He might get a quick, night in the office, first round or second round finish. But I just think that's why it's so hard to be such a dominant champ, is because once you have the belt, you don't get fed a lot of cans. Essentially, you're getting the best of the best. So I'm curious to see, because for as dominant as he looks, to have a truly dominant reign, some 5-round wars, you just can't win all of them. Mm-hmm. So that's what, yeah, I'm interested to see how that works out as well.
Yeah. And I want to touch on where he's going next as well, because I think that's going to be a pretty big point of discussion. But one thing I will add is he's getting a lot better in his striking very fast. There's a film study up on the YouTube that I did on Islam. I did that before the first Volk fight. So that's been quite a while ago now. And one of the things I didn't like about his striking was that I felt like he was over-reliant on 1 or 2, maybe 3 strikes. I have to go back and relook at everything I did for that. But his striking was very simple. Simple may not be the right word, but the amount of options he had was limited. It was some nice kicks on the outside, but if you're in the pocket, he's got a good lead hand counter and some things like that. And I was kind of worried about the overall of what happens if you're in rounds where you have to strike for long periods, because you can't just, I'm going to throw my lead counter every single time, and that's the only punch I can throw. It just doesn't work like that. But in this fight, I think he did a much better job at putting together combinations, digging to the body with his hands, finding short hooks on the inside, while being defensively responsible. So I just want to note that, because that is fairly important. If anyone goes back and looks at the film study, I think he's actually improved a lot since then, and that was a year to 2 years ago. So and that also says a lot about where he can go as a champion, when content that I made and things I said about him a year to 2 years ago is almost out of date, just based off improvements that we've seen in the octagon. So I think that's important to note.
which
Um,
is I was
yeah,
saying,
go ahead.
yeah, it's even scarier that he's already looked at as like maybe the pound for pound, or as dominant he is, and he is still getting better too.
Hmm. Yeah,
Which
it's impressive.
yeah,
It is impressive. And then I want to get your opinion on where he should go next, because I think there's really two schools of thought here. I think the schools of thought are Leon Edwards, 170, or, well, I guess you got Leon versus Bilal, so it'd be winner of that, or Sarukian at 155 pounds. I think those are really the two big options. I think some people will press the big red button and say Conor beats Chandler on the 29th and you rush Conor to the title. But like I said, that's the big red button. And that's not exactly the, you know, the most standard route forward. So where would you like to see Islam go next? Because I don't think the answer is really written in stone yet.
I think there's one clear answer. I think it should be Armin Sarukian for the next fight. That's what they were gonna make, but they were gonna make Armin fight on short notice, which I also don't necessarily think is fair. After the list he just compiled to get to the belt, and then you force him, to fight on short notice. But I also think,
One thing I do want to add on that real quick, since you brought it up, Dustin, or the Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint Denis fight. Benoit Saint Denis said that that was he was if he beat Poirier, they were going to give him the title fight. So that's why it got offered to Sarukian on short notices, because Benoit Saint Denis lost. So just adding to that as well, because I think that's an important note with them. Uh,
are you,
Sarukian wasn't the first plan. Is
was that a
my
hundred
point.
percent too? I did see that Saint
Yeah,
Denis said that. You
yeah,
think for
that
sure
sounds
if he wins that fight, he was
if
getting
he
it?
beats Poirier, I think so. Yeah, because then they wouldn't
Okay.
have had to worry about the 300 short notice and getting somebody back in there. And ultimately, that didn't work. And then they go back to Poirier. So since they went back to Poirier, I think even if worst case scenario, they would have offered it to Armin and then still went back to Benoit Saint Denis. So I that makes sense to me.
And then I guess my other question was Gaethje Holloway already booked.
Yeah, that was booked too.
Okay. Um,
I think they knew that the winner of that wasn't fighting. I think they had a pretty solid idea that the winner of that wasn't going to turn around on a month.
well, I meant, yeah. Well, I didn't know if Gaethje, because Gaethje, was off the head
Oh,
kick and stuff. So like maybe it's
yeah,
he could do it again. But
that makes sense.
uh, shoot, I forgot what I was going to say. The first point. But
Oh, why Armin should get the shot?
oh yeah. So I think I do. Yeah, I just do believe he's next in line. And the main reason too why I don't love the Leon is, and it doesn't. It's the new state of the UFC. It doesn't matter. It's probably an old opinion of you have to prove it. You got to defend your belt. You got to defend the belt in your own weight class before you do these champ and super fights and stuff. And he wins the belt and then gets to fight twice against someone that's not from his division. And like this is his first defense, like his first defense against a lightweight fighter, not someone trying to move up. So just defend. Yeah, I think he should have to defend his belt more. Not to say I wouldn't hate that fight at all. I'm sure it'd be super entertaining, and actually I like a lot of the things that come with it. But middleweight or welterweight needs to move too. They're fighting, the Bilal fight's happening, but there's some names in that division too. That division was in a huge standstill for a long time with the Usman Masvidal stuff, and it feels like it's just now starting to get going again. So I just would rather see both these divisions and both those champions specifically too, because what Leon does he have a Oh, did he beat? I guess defended against Usman, so he
And
has
Colby.
and Colby. So that's two defenses. But then even then, give or take, Bilal is still a little older. But once again, those are both older names. That was Colby's third attempt at the belt. Like it's
Hmm.
time to start changing of the guards. I think, and just overall get movement in those divisions. So especially, and it's not like there's no fights for them. Like Armin I think would be an amazing fight too, and I'm sure Leon. I don't know exactly who's booked and who's not, but there's some fights to make in that division as well.
Yeah, I ultimately agree with you, and I have a lot of the same thoughts. I just like, in my opinion, like Islam and Leon isn't the type of fight, or Islam versus Bilal. And if it's Bilal said he wouldn't fight Islam, so I don't even know if it's a possible outcome if Bilal wins that fight. So that's a whole nother discussion. So I'm just gonna speak as if Leon wins, which I'm not saying is gonna happen, but I'm just saying Bilal doesn't like the idea of fighting Islam. So just for sake of discussion, we'll lean towards it being Leon. Um, but in that case, like I don't think Leon and Islam is the type of fight that's like I absolutely 100% need to see that. We need to drop what we're doing and we need to make that fight. Like to me, I don't think it's that level of a fight. So I think that it can benefit from having Islam fight Armin and Leon's fighting Bilal, and Leon said he wants to fight 2 times this year. So to me, like if Leon wins and then wants to defend again at the end of the year and maybe against Shavkat, like I think that is a good outcome for that division. Is the champ fighting twice and Bilal and Shavkat getting shots this year? I think is a pretty beneficial year for the welterweight division, and like maybe they don't give Shavkat the shot, but it sounds like they wanted to do Jack Della Maddalena and he's hurt. So if Shavkat's fighting, who is he fighting? If it's not Jack Della, now you've got another question. So I just wouldn't hate I wouldn't hate Shavkat getting the next shot. And what happens if Shavkat wins? Now you got Shavkat versus Islam. Like to me, that may be a better fight than Islam versus Leon. So I don't think that's necessarily gonna crumble things if that goes down. And maybe a year from now or 6 months from now, we have Leon beats Bilal and Shavkat, and we have Islam who beats Armin. And all of a sudden, like now that fight is bigger than it would have been if we just stopped and made it right now. So I think you can take the time to let it grow, and then you have a better fight when it actually happens. A more compelling fight at the minimum. They'd still be the same fighters.
Exactly. I 100% agree. I think too, while UFC fans, and especially like hardcore, they, I mean, maybe most people with Islam now, but Leon specifically, I think for more casual fans, they might not realize how like great those two fighters are. So yeah, especially like you said, build it up. If you just build it up and they both win two more, defend two more times, then now I'm thinking like, okay, this is really like a fight. Then yeah, I would want to watch. Or like you were saying, maybe after two more defenses from each fighter, you're like, okay, now I need to see this. This is something where maybe we can drop everything.
Yeah.
But
And
it's
to me, off the back of that, to me, it's very similar when Izzy went up to fight Jan at 205. I thought Jan should have defended that belt once or twice, and now that's a better fight when Izzy goes up. Like to me, I just sometimes it's just not like that wasn't that compelling of a fight in my opinion. It was because it was Izzy, but the light heavyweight champ that he was going up against was I like Jan, but that wasn't that didn't blow the roof off in terms of pay-per-view sales.
Yeah, I agree. It was that one was I remember it was all really because of Izzy. It was just to
Mhm.
see if he could do it. But the reason I was fine with it and the reason I was even curious to see if he could do it was just because he had defended so many times already.
Yep.
So I was like, go for it. But yeah, look what happened too, Jan. That belt's changed like four times now too. So
Yeah.
or
La-
yeah, it was
I was
I
just
was
gonna
gonna say
say.
or Pereira, but he moved up now too. So
Oh
technically,
yeah, that would have been something. Um, last thing I want to get your thoughts on this fight before we move to the co-main. Dustin Poirier, do you think this is his last fight? He said he didn't retire afterwards, but he said maybe I'm retired. I got to think about it. What am I fighting for if I'm not fighting for the belt? It was a very wishy-washy, and I don't think he knows the answer. But do you think Poirier fights again?
no, I'm probably not. But there's two options. Uh, I heard from some people they were like, "Oh, maybe a McGregor," but I thought Poirier he came out and said he's not fighting McGregor again. But then again,
He did say that.
when the contract with all that money is in your face, maybe. But then the only other thing was a Colby fight, without maybe Poirier cutting weight or anything too. But I know they've had beef and stuff, and they really don't like each other. And I think that would sell pretty decently as well. Obviously, not like a Connor fight, but that's a good little fight. between each other with the storylines. Could be a fun matchup, and it's not like the scariest fight necessarily. Um, but overall, it's tough. I think he's probably done now. But those would be my two maybes.
Yeah, I kind of think he will fight again, just because I found it weird the I thought that would have been a perfect moment for him to put the gloves in the octagon. So for him not to do that, I felt I left the door pretty wide open in my opinion. Um, and I know we say he won't get another title shot, but how true is that? We saw how he backdoored his way into this one. Like how true? How like if you made me say will he get another title fight, I would pick no. But with that being said, like one or two things goes your way, and you never know. We just saw it happen, so that's something to consider.
That is true, I guess. And the reason I say no is because I don't see that other
Hmm.
title shot right. But yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Maybe just one more fight send off, try to get a win, and then a decent money fight. But yeah, I mean, he looked great. I think his stock's extremely high. I don't know there's a single person that dislikes him. He wins one more big one, and then yeah, next thing you know, he could still be in the mix for it.
Hmm. And some names that I'll throw out there. I agree with you on the Colby name. I don't remember what year it was, but I did a fights I want to see this year. You know, I do that every year around the new year, and that was one of them. One year, I don't remember if it was 2024 or 2023, but that was a fight there. It was probably 2023, but that's a fight that I've always liked, and I don't think that's a bad fight for uh, Dustin at 170. Like he doesn't want to fight 170 because they're big. Colby's not. Colby's probably this size, same size as Islam, to be honest with you. Other guy that McGregor, doors open. Maybe the check's big enough. We'll have to wait and see. I Volk called out Poirier as well. Volk is a name that I think that's a compelling fight. If we're not giving Volk the rematch against Ilya, if he has to go do something else, I think that's a good fight at 155, and you give Volk the time to get to 155, the time to rest his head. Don't rush Poirier back in there. He's pretty injured. You know, maybe the end of this year, early next year. Like, I wouldn't hate Poirier and Volk, same age. Like, I think that makes a lot of sense if we're just, trying to book together fun fights. I think that's one that makes a decent amount of sense.
Yeah, I think that's. I didn't know that. I'd be there for that. I think that's a really
Mhm.
great fight to make, and that screams BMF fight, to be honest too. But I don't know, what exactly they're doing with the belt and everything.
Mhm.
But um, yeah, that's. I don't know. Those are two greats for so long. Who wouldn't really want to see that?
Yeah, that was my thought process as well. All right. UFC 302 co-main event. Paulo Costa and Sean Strickland. I will lead us off here because I have a couple of thoughts. Um, and these may turn into rants. So, not too long, but I do want to lead us off. My two big things here is how Paulo Costa fought and how the fight was scored. So I'm going to start with how the actual fight went. To me, Paulo's game plan in that fight was one of the craziest game plans I've ever seen. You're fighting a guy who his goal is to walk you down, feint his teeps, throw his straights. Maybe he'll throw a sloppy hook at you every once in a while, but that's really the game plan. And it's not a hard game plan to figure out. You watch one Sean Strickland fight, they all look the same. And he decides that he wants to play off the back foot and skirt around the outside of the octagon and barely throw any strikes to the head and just kick the leg and throw his jab to the body. He threw the jab to the body all night, but he didn't even throw the jab to the body and then throw the right hand behind it. To me, it was a wild, wild game plan. And then when you look at guys who have had success against Sean's going to try and walk you down. There's guys who say, I'm not going to let you walk me down. I'm going to stand my ground. Even if it's once a minute or once every 30 seconds, the amount of times you can do it varies depending on how good your cardio is, how much success you're having. But guys like Jared Cannonier and DDP and Pereira did it, but that was one. He did it once and the fight was over. But Cannonier and DDP did it over the course of 25 minutes. They said, I'm going to stand my ground and throw. And you can land when you do that. And it helps when you're a big power puncher like Costa is. you'd think there would be a threat to, I'm going to sit here, I'm not going to let you walk me down anymore, and I'm going to throw a 3-piece boxing combo and try and take your head off. And I felt like when he really started to do that, it was the 4th round. And I'm not saying he had a ton of success in the 4th round, but why'd you wait till the 4th round to even try it like once? He did it like once or twice to really let his hands go in combinations. Why didn't you do it in the 1st round when you had all your power? When you really could have taken his head off? Or when you could have put the thought in his mind of, hey, there's serious consequences if I keep walking him down like this. So I don't know what Paulo was thinking. I picked Paulo in that fight. I bet Paulo in that fight, but I have no idea what his whole entire thought process was. It baffled me.
Yeah, well, so real quick, I think that 4th round, I can't exactly remember. I want to say it was one of his best, or if he might maybe even won that round necessarily. But the other thing, like we always talk about, like you always say, of why it's so hard to take Strickland is because he loses close decisions all the time. But like you said, you choose to stand your ground once or twice. You win 2 of those exchanges. That might win you a legit round against Strickland too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's even just standing here, like, oh, he might stand his ground like once, twice, 3 times. So it's like that's all you need sometimes to actually win a round too against Strickland.
Yep. And I love that point, and that takes me into my second really thing I wanted to talk about, which is how the fight was scored. One judge scores it for Costa. Listen, Paulo Costa did not win that fight. He did not win 4 rounds of that fight. I scored it for Sean. So I want to get that out of the way. So I don't want to make it seem like I scored the fight for Paulo. But what I will say is everyone is acting absolutely shocked that one judge had the audacity to score it against Strickland when that happens every time he fights, because he doesn't extend his winning margins at all. Like, the way that fights are scored is based off damage. Well, Strickland walking forward and throwing his teep does not equate much for damage when the other guy's kicking you in the leg and throwing jabs to the body. The first round, both of them landed like nothing to the head. So how are we going to score that round out of damage? Like, maybe Strickland deserves to win that round because he's walking forward. Maybe that's true. But when there's no damage being done on either side, you leave yourself open to losing that round. And there's other rounds. Round 4 is a great example. I thought I scored rounds 1 and 4 for Paulo. And it's because Sean doesn't throw that many shots to the head. Like, I'm not going to score a round for you just because you're walking forward to make it seem like you're winning when you're really only tipping them in the body. Like, the amount of damage that you're doing does not equate how dominant the actual fight looks. And to be honest, I thought Paulo was winning round 5 until the flurry at the end of the 5th round where Sean gets a knockdown and but
Yeah,
for the first 4 minutes and 30 seconds of that round, it's a close round.
it was close.
Like, the rounds that Sean did win, he won round 3 pretty wide. And then you look at the significant strike totals. It looks big because he landed a large portion of his headshots in round 3. And then that leaves round 1 where they each landed a handful. Round 4 where Paulo was throwing a decent amount to the head, and round 5 was close. And then that round looks wider in hindsight because he throws 40 strikes in the last 30 seconds. And credit to him for doing that because he needed to do that. I'm not going to take that away from Sean for doing that. But my point is, these Sean Strickland fights are always close, and then we're always surprised when a judge scores it for the other guy. It's like we should learn our lesson by now. And you can tell when some people didn't watch the Apex fights of Sean in the Apex back when he was fighting Jared Cannonier in the Apex, and when he was fighting Jack Hermanson in the Apex. When he was fighting Jack Hermanson in the Apex, no one gave a shit and no one watched it. And then the fight sucked, and people said, yeah, that's why we didn't watch it. And now, since Sean gets on the mic and screams that we're going to war, then you sit there and watch the boring decision. Well, I'm watching him either way because we're doing this, but he tricks other people that wouldn't have watched it into watching it. So that's my rant on this fight, and I will wrap it up by saying Sean did do enough to win, and credit to him for actually going out there and getting a win because he did really need that win to keep himself at the top of the division. So I will leave those positives for Sean there as well. But the 2 points that I made earlier about Costa fighting like an idiot and the scoring, like, those are, to me, are real legit things that I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about.
Yeah, I'll say I liked the odds. I liked Costa's chances. It's so funny. It's like the exact inverse of happened because we both took Holloway, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we thought there was a specific way, like if he fought, if he gets what he's good at, if he, like the things he does so well, and if he fights, executes a good game plan, there's a chance he could win. Of course, he executed it almost perfectly to where it looked, it almost like, how did we not pick him, right? Well,
Mhm.
this is the exact opposite of what happens. And I told a couple friends, and a couple friends who got mad at me. They're like, "Oh, Costa was the worst pick ever," and I was like, "Well, I was hoping he would execute a great game plan. They'd do what he does well. Unfortunately, exact opposite of Holloway. Just bad game plan and didn't really execute anything. And so then you're sitting there like, well, that's what happens when you bet on dogs sometimes. It's just, yeah, it's almost worst case scenario. So I was with you on that. And then the other thing is, much of a fan, or as much as I'm not a fan of Strickland, and it's just specifically, yeah, the way he fights. I thought he did really well at his game plan and did enough. It's never too much, or it's always, very close, but I think he was fine. I thought he was checking leg kicks a little better too than some other
Yeah,
fights I've
I
seen.
agree with that.
So I thought that was good. But the other point I'll say is I thought his coaches finally, this was one of the first times I'd maybe have to listen to that DDP one again, but I thought it was finally one of the first times his coaches were even saying like, Sean, you need to do more, and
Mhm.
not like just yeah, like you were saying, the pressure or the jab and all that stuff, but like you actually genuinely need to make it look like you're trying to do more, at least for the judges.
Yep, I love that because
I thought it was great.
I was losing my mind watching from the couch, and the commentaries painting like this picture that he's like the greatest fighter of all time, and he's putting on the best performance you've ever seen from middleweight. Then his corner comes in and says, "You need to throw more." It's like, thank you. It's like you need to separate yourself, and it's like, and that's a great corner there. Eric Nixick's a great coach. So, and I also would have loved to see how people perceive that fight if the commentary was not, praising his blessings the whole fight. Like if the commentary was, oh well, neither guy is really attacking the head, neither guy is really doing that much damage. They're both spending a lot of time on the body and legs. And listen, I'm a big advocate for body and leg strikes, but I feel like they weren't taking the next step. Like you throw the body and head strikes so that you can either get a guy tired or set something else up. They weren't doing the second part of that. They were only doing the first part. So I wonder what that commentary would have looked like if it was more critical of the overall fight. And I wonder how the fan reaction would have changed because the commentary was just running with the fact that it was a Strickland masterclass. And I think that has really bled its way into fan reaction of the fight as a whole.
I think so too. Also, that's a master class? Like, I just don't
I
I
don't see
don't
it either.
think so. I remember master classes are like Cody Garbrandt, Dominic Cruz, like truly just maybe not what you expect 100%, but like one person literally just looked like Cruz didn't know what to do in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen like an Izzy master class before. I just don't know if those are
Yeah.
I don't think the decision should have been that close, but like that's
Mm-hmm.
it's for a decision not to be like a 50-45, maybe even like a type master class, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I was hearing it. I was trying to play. I was trying to play it out loud when I was cleaning and stuff when I was closing. To even though I couldn't watch all of it, to just hear, and yeah, they made it sound like I was sitting there knowing I had picked Paulo and stuff. I'm like, oh, it's not going well then, but yeah.
Yeah. Um, After the fight, Strickland calls out DDP, and his logic was, well, I beat Izzy, so I should get the shot and not Izzy. Well, they haven't signed the fight for UFC 306 in Perth, but I think it's like the worst kept secret. Like everyone knows that Izzy versus DDP is going to be the 305 main event in Perth, just like everyone knew Leon versus Bilal was going to be the 304 main event in England. Like we had brought that up several times on the podcast. We're like, yeah, that's going to be and not saying we're geniuses, but it was fairly easy to call the Perth. Like they're going to Perth 305, so it can be Izzy and DDP. So I don't exactly understand his logic there. Um, One thing I will add, I wouldn't bring up that logic knowing that Jared Cannonier fights this weekend and he lost to Jared Cannonier. So if Jared Cannonier wins, he can say, well, I heard Sean say he should fight for the title, but I beat Sean. So just throwing out, you never know. You never know how that might blow up in his face a week from now. But let's assume that 305 is Izzy, DDP. Would you like to see Sean fight the winner?
If it was fight the winner of Izzy DDP?
Yeah.
No, because I'm a Robert Whitaker stan, and if he were to beat Hamzat, I would want him to try again. But and then who is Cannonier fights next week too
Mhm.
against Imavov.
Yep. That's this upcoming
To be
card.
fair, I don't know who Strickland should have called out because that's all the names at the top booked right
Yeah.
there. Unless you could try to play the waiting game, fight someone a little lower, know you can beat them, and then four people are losing, so or maybe just try to call out a winner.
Mhm.
But that's tough. Me personally, um, I wouldn't. I'm off the train. I'm trying to dial it back in. I wouldn't hate a Strickland. I'm still not gonna like it or love it, but I won't hate it. But I personally would rather see some other names up there.
Yeah.
If anything, he should. That Jared Cannonier one was close, and if Cannonier wins, maybe they do that rematch, and really, after
Mhm.
that fight, then one of them is for sure got to be next in line.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad idea. It does kind of hinge on the other outcomes in the division. Robert Whitaker versus Hamzat Chimaev. I think if Chimaev wins, it's 100% Chimaev.
I think so.
If Whitaker wins, I don't know how that is going to be perceived. Basically, off the fact that he's already lost to both, so I don't know exactly how that's going to go down. I think it's an interesting thought.
Yeah,
Um, but I
I think
think
a DDP rematch might be better for him. I don't know because he's only lost once,
yeah.
and you could always say the one things of like he drops one every once in a while and then wins three, so it could have
Mhm.
just been that once in a while maybe, but
Yeah.
also he. We always say this when it comes up. I thought he won the Izzy second one. It's been a while. Izzy's looked more human, so maybe
Mhm.
I don't know if people want to see that fight for a third time, but I think
Yeah.
people should be more confident than the last two times that he could win it this time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we bring up these ifs like, oh well, he already fought this guy and he already fought this guy, but you never know what the buzz is like when he beats Chimaev. Like hypothetically, we're talking about if he gets a title shot, he would have to beat Chimaev. Like, what's that buzz like? Like, there's a real chance that like everyone thinks Chimaev's going to win, and then he goes out there and stuns people, and say he knocks out Chimaev, then like maybe he really has some serious wheels behind him. Like Poirier, for example, just got the shot off getting serious wheels off a Benoit Saint Denis knockout. Like maybe it could be something similar, and I almost think it would be bigger than that, like regrowth, if that makes sense, or rebuild, just because Chimaev is a fairly bigger name than Saint Denis was.
That is, yeah, I did not think about that. I think, yeah, if you put it that way and he beats Chimaev, I couldn't understand how the hype wouldn't be through the roof, considering not only is that like the UFC's baby right there, but yeah, huge fan base and stuff, and a lot of
Mhm.
people really love Chimaev. A lot of people have been wanting Chimaev to fight for the belt for years now.
Mhm.
So I guess if there's any for Rob, yeah, if there's any way to get the path to the belt is maybe take out the biggest hype train, you know, in the company right now, or one of.
Yep. And one other small thing, I don't know, well, maybe it's a little bit bigger, but Cannonier versus Imavov, we already talked about it a little bit. But just in terms of getting a title fight, Strickland has a win over Imavov and Whitaker has a win over Cannonier. So if I'm Cannonier, or excuse me, if I'm Whitaker, I'm rooting for Cannonier. If I am Sean, I'm rooting for Imavov. Like, because either way, your win is going to age a little bit better and your resume is a little better. And so I think that those two guys should be rooting in that direction, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So, and
And
we'll see how what
Strickland,
that fight turns out like this weekend. That may change things, but that one buried on a UFC Louisville card that's not great in comparison to one fight's on a pay-per-view, the next fight's on the best fight night of the year. Like, it's not looking good for Imavov and Cannonier, unfortunately, because I love Cannonier. I'd love to see him fight for a
I
title
do.
again. but just reading the tea leaves here, it doesn't look good for him.
And funny enough, all those names and Strickland and Whitaker have not fought each other
Yeah.
still, right? It's like kind of the one name. So I could definitely see the UFC making that fight, um, as a title limiter just to milk it even more. It depends what, obviously what they want to do with the belt, but
Yeah.
I can see, a bunch of, crazy wins and stuff and them two somehow fighting each other for whatever reason.
Yeah. That's good. I think we're going to have a clear roadmap of this division, obviously once the championship fight's done, but once these handful of fights are booked, this was kind of the first domino in 3 or 4 dominoes that need to fall. All right. Next fight on the card, slightly smaller fight, much shorter fight, 25 minutes versus 1 minute. The long and short of this fight is Michal Oleksiejczuk lands big overhand. Kevin Holland says, "You can't grapple. Give me your arm." And that arm was either, I don't think it was broken. I do think it was dislocated. They stopped the fight. We were all of us were really heavy on Holland in our preview last week, and the striking was a lot closer than I think we all thought it was going to be. But one of the things we said was, hey, Michal Oleksiejczuk cannot grapple. How often do you see men get caught in arm bars in the UFC? It is kind of rare at this point. The number of arm bars over the years have been trickling down, 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 down. So Holland lands the arm bar, and that's the wrap. What'd you make of this matchup?
I'll try to keep it. We'll see if the construction starts up again. But yeah, I think, and to say, oh, there it is. It wasn't even the slickest setup or anything, too. But yeah, he obviously he got him. I mean, yeah, it was very, for what maybe could have been more interesting on the feet for a couple rounds.
Mm-hmm.
That was our one thing. He got him quick, and then I was working, so I saw it get locked in and tapped. Was it, in your opinion? Was it broken, or because I didn't think it was, like, because I thought it was an early stoppage. 'Cause I think he tapped once, but I was not fully focused in on it. So obviously, if it was broken, it was broken.
It was weird because I don't think it was broken. I think it was dislocated just based off where the gruesomeness of it happened. Same thing happened with Jamal Hill and Paul Craig, where the actual injury is in the elbow, and then they say it's broken night of the fight. You get the X-rays back, not broken. Elbow is popped out of place. Usually, when you see an elbow break, it's going to be or an armbar break. It's in the forearm. We've seen that on a couple occasions. There was a heavyweight fight that Herb Dean stopped years ago, which is the most famous example. I can't think of it off my top of my head. So I do think it was a dislocation. And it's weird because I'm fine with the stoppage, but like I also would have been fine if they would let it kept going. At the same time, Michal kind of taps once, and then it's like, is he going to tap again? But he pulled him off as he was tapping once. So very weird stoppage, and I'm not really upset about it. But if it wouldn't have been stopped, I would have been fine with it if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does to me because I wasn't even specifically saying broken. I meant dislocated as well. I just didn't know if something genuinely, like, was very wrong with the fighter, because I know the ref does have to protect them. I also didn't hate the stoppage, I think, but as weird as it sounds, if it was dislocated, for some reason I also would have been fine if it kept going, only because it seemed like the other dude just genuinely did not care and was still like able to fight, or at least prepared to, he didn't seem like he was unable to protect himself. At least at first, when it was stopped and stuff. Because, some people, they'll be like, oh, and then the whole next however long, they're like sitting there, can't move, in excruciating pain. But from the quick things I saw after the fight, he was still like arguing and talking and, moving it and stuff. So,
And I think it's a weird like decision to make because if you were to post on your arm and it pops out, we've seen that get stopped. But I guess usually guys yell so you could count it as a verbal submission. But if you post on an arm and get slammed and it pops, the fight gets stopped. But then you have other fights like Gilbert Burns versus Bilal Muhammad, where he got hit with the knee and his shoulder was basically toast, and he couldn't throw with one of his hands, and that fight went on for 5 rounds. So there are examples on both sides of this where you see the gruesome injury, it gets stopped, and then there's examples where, well, the injury wasn't gruesome, but Gilbert Burns was not safe in there,
Yeah,
only having one hand to defend himself. So
they made Macy Barber. She fought on a blown out knee. So
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, and the knees. A couple people have fought. I think they said Santos blew out one of his knees in the Jones fight and
Hmm.
stuff. So I mean, yeah, and it's weird that there is like a little difference in injuries or so, or when it's
Yeah.
cool and when it's not okay.
Hands all the time. Guys break hands
Mm.
all the time. You never know until after. So
Moreno broke his hand in that Pantoja fight, I
Holland
believe.
against
So.
Wonder Boy, the corner stopped that. The ref didn't stop that. So
Hmm.
it's kind of a you never really know, I guess. Do you care who Kevin Holland fights next? Because to me, there's part of
No,
me that's like, Kevin Holland's just fun. Book him against whoever, and it's like, yeah, there we go. Like I almost don't
I
care at this
heard
point.
he called himself a gatekeeper
Hmm.
in his interview, and saw he sounded like fine with it, or he was
Yeah,
okay with it.
he
It
said he
wasn't
would.
in
He
like
said
a
he'll be a
negative way.
gatekeeper as long as you keep Kev around. He said as long as you keep Kev around, he's happy. So
Yeah, he's not someone I don't think um like he doesn't have to be a straight gatekeeper. I think he still has potential to, move up and still
mhm.
try to, if he wins a couple, give him that higher fight. But yeah, I have no problem with him continually fighting like ranked guys and stuff like that, though, or like keeping him in that good level.
Yep, I'm with you. I think that's the right call. Let's go to Brown versus Elizeu dos Santos next. One quick programming note or scheduling note. We're going to do Almeida versus Romanov after this. We're not talking about Nico Price versus Alex Moreno because Nico Price versus Alex Moreno sucked, and Jailton Almeida is in the top 7 or 8 at heavyweight, so that fight's much more important to talk about. Randy Brown versus Elizeu dos Santos, close fight. Round 1 goes Brown. Round 2 goes Dos Santos. He almost chokes out Randy Brown. Then Randy Brown gets up, takes his back, almost chokes him out. Round 2 goes Dos Santos. Round 3, close round, but I thought Randy Brown deserved to win. And I think Randy Brown earned this victory decision. And it's nothing that makes you go, oh, he's got to get ranked. But you think about it and you go, oh, well, Easy Dose is pretty good. Like, I respect someone who beats him. And then he has won. I don't have his win streak pulled up in front of me, but he has won quite a few fights in a row now at this point. I can pull that up in a second, but he is on quite the win streak. So, what do you make of this performance from Randy and kind of this growth that we're seeing? Because somehow Randy Brown, I don't think he's lost since his Jack Della Maddalena loss. He's put himself in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, so I wanted to see more. Obviously, I wanted better, a little bit, especially on the main event and stuff. Maybe not a better performance, but I can't hate on it. Like you said, once you pull up the win streak, winning's winning. And I mean, not everyone's going to be ideal where you get that picture perfect finish or anything. But I thought Dos Santos looked really good too. And so just winning a tough fight like that, and I do believe I thought he won also. So I think in general, uh, getting a win is what you need to do in the fight game and stuff like that. Especially someone in his position too, still trying to get up to the top more. And yeah, I mean, I thought he did what he needed to do and I believe got a solid win over a good opponent. So we'll see what his next one is.
Yeah, I agree. Win streak, only a 3-fight win streak. 7-1 in his last 8, though, with the only
Okay.
loss coming to Jack Della, which at this point, I'm not going to hold you for that. That's a pretty. I mean, he got mopped in that fight, but could have been worse. So, I give Randy Brown a lot of credit, and I think he's improving a lot. And he had to, get a little dirty to win that one, and that's what happened. It wasn't the best performance, but at the same time, I have respect for that type of performance. At the same time, so
Four
what we're
eye pokes is
talking,
crazy.
yeah,
I said
and
4 eye pokes is crazy though.
yeah, oh yeah. That is true. I'm with you on that. We gotta rein that in.
I thought they were
Um,
going to take a point from him on the last one. I'm not going to lie, but
and then we would have had a draw on our hands. That would have been tough. Um, Last thing I will say on this, while we're talking gatekeepers for Kevin Holland, I think Randy Brown, Kevin Holland's a fun fight at 170, and both really long guys, some overlapping skills. Maybe that makes a boring fight, but I'd be interested to see how each guy does when their length is kind of neutralized by another guy who's just as long and both good front chokes. I think that would actually be a really fun fight on of pay-per-view that's not great, you put that on the main card, and I think that's a fine fight. So I'd actually be down with that.
And you think Randy Brown has now deserved a ranked opponent?
Yeah, I'd say so. If he doesn't get one, I'm not going to be like, oh, what the hell? Like, I'm not going to be mad about it. He may be one away, but
I'd be
if they
fine
give
with
him
it too.
one,
I think
I'm cool.
that's a good one. I mean, Luke A. Page, Neil Magny, Joaquin Buckley, Jeff Neal. Those are maybe not going to get too high, but I think those are all fine names. For him.
I'd agree with that. All right. Almeida versus Romanov. Once again, not a ton on this one. Jailton Almeida looked pretty good. I think this was a matter of who gets on top first, and it was Almeida. I am continuously impressed with his ability to wrestle bigger guys. I think, just for him personally, moving up from light heavyweight, got to give you credit when you go out there and out grapple the big guy, especially someone like Romanov, who is a grappler. And the main reason I wanted to talk about this, less about the fight, more about what's next, because Jailton has been a guy that they've promoted a lot. Didn't do great against Curtis. Now we're back in a position where maybe he gets another bump up. He called out Ciryl Gane. I'll just say I don't think Ciryl Gane accepts that fight. I'd be pretty confident in that one. That won't be your main event at UFC Paris. So I think a matchup against like Sergey Pavlovich versus Alexander Volkov, the loser of that, would make a little bit of sense. I think that would be a good way to approach that. Or maybe the loser of Tom Aspinall and Curtis Blades, like someone who's not coming off a win, but someone who like you get respect for beating is basically my thought process.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That Curtis Blades fight was going to be one of his tougher ones, but I mean, he is just such a flawed fight. I don't know. It's tough because as much as I do like his ground game and stuff, I would like the Sergey Volkov. I think the loser, that's a great place to start.
And that's an interesting one too, because like I'd wonder how both those guys would look against a dominant grappler. Like I think that would be an interesting matchup. And my bad for saying the loser of Curtis and Tom, because he already lost to Curtis, so that doesn't really make sense. And maybe the Tom fight isn't exactly what you maybe that's not what you do with Tom if he loses. So thought about that one for a split second longer, and maybe that's not the best. And even if you go down, even if you go down the rankings, like below, you get like to Marcin Tybura, Sergey Spivak, like I could care less, to be honest. Tai Tuivasa, we know he's going to take down Tai and submit him. Like, to me, just same with Jairzinho Rosenstrike, like, it's just not a lot at heavyweight that really gets you excited is my point here.
Yeah, I forgot that Tom Aspinall Curtis was booked because I want Tom to fight for the belt, and I know it's just not going to happen until the Jones Stipe thing. So I get why the fight's booked, but to me, I don't know if this is wrong, but to me, it's literally just maybe we'll even say Tom and John Jones and everyone else. And so I think when Tom has to, not to say that he still can't be tested by certain people, but I just think if he's going to have to take those fights, he should at least have a belt on him or it be for a championship, which kind of sucks. But I wouldn't mind Almeida getting in the mix more and just adding another name to maybe round robin with some of those guys.
Yeah, and a lot of those guys at heavyweight have fought each other.
Exactly.
Like the Volkovs, like Blades. Sergey hasn't. Gane's fought a couple. Like Derek Lewis has fought everybody. Tybura's fought quite a few. Like there's just so many. There's so little new names that we're getting to the point where all these dudes have fought, and it's kind of ridiculous.
Exactly. Just a new name would be nice, even if he's going to do the same thing and fight everyone. But
yeah. Last thing I'll add on that, Stipe, now ranked number 6. I'm not a big guy at checking the rankings, but I did find that interesting that he has fallen all the way down to number 6. All right, let's hit some final thoughts on UFC 302. I can lead us off. There wasn't really much that really stuck out on these 302 prelims, to be honest. I'll say the Mickey Gall and Basil Hafez fight was a very good fight. That was an entertaining Lots of big shots landed, some knockdowns, some wobbles on both sides of that. I thought Mickey won, but I'm not going to get too upset over that. But for final thoughts, those two guys both deserve some credit for going out there and putting on what probably was the second best fight of the night, depending on your opinion of Holland and Oleksiejczuk. That was the closest thing to a 15-minute back and forth that we saw outside of the main event. Obviously, that went past 15 minutes, but that was the closest thing we saw to a close fight that was both guys having moments.
Yeah, that was actually one of the one fights I got to watch. When I was first got.
It was a
But
pretty good fight.
yeah, I was happy with it. The other one, I guess, Grant Dawson simply cannot finish. He was one of my legs on literally just to finish. Um, did not happen. But the other one, I guess, I did see some of the Nico Moreno fight. Yeah, it was fine. I think you might have swayed me. We ended up having the same picks, I believe, the 4-1, and that fight, I could have went really either way. I was wanting to lean Nico, and I think you had picked them, so I went with them. But that was fine. Did you ever realize why they made that switch? I don't know.
I have no idea, and it didn't make much sense to me.
Not at all.
For those that didn't know, last week the Almeida and Romanov fight was fourth on the bill. Second fight to take place on the main card, and they switched it out for the Price and Moreno fight, and no one really ever said why, and it didn't make much sense to me. Almeida got in hindsight's 50-50, but I was pretty out on Price and Moreno as a whole. Anyone who wants to go back and read the preview, I said I don't want to pick either of them. I didn't really talk much about the fight because it was kind of a shit fight, to be honest. It didn't really make much sense why it was boosted up to that slot on the card when Almeida was one of the three guys who got a finish on the card. So it probably would have been better. I know that wasn't a thrilling fight, but Nico Price and Alex Moreno was legitimately like a bad look for the UFC, if that makes sense. Like, I was watching that from my couch, and I said to my friend, like, this is the type of fight you'll see boxing fans post on Twitter and be like, you guys watch this stuff? Like, this is what you think is entertaining in MMA? And it's like, that's the type of fight that was, and that could have been buried on the prelims.
I was surprised one thing I will say, another shout out was Roman Kopylov. I really like him as a striker. I got the job done. I thought it was a good bounce back after the loss to Fluffy Hernandez. So good to see him back in the win column. But that was one of the things of like, some of my friends in the group, and like I said, I wasn't fully glued into this one, but some of my friends that were all getting to watch it were kind of like, this fight card. Before that, they actually put it in, I think, after that Paulo fight, the Strickland fight, they were like, this fight card's been like bad. And that's what I saw a lot online. So hopefully UFC does something about that then. Because now I know it's not just us hating on their lack of effort, it seems like, on cards. Also, and back to earlier, if McGregor doesn't fight, that card is horrible. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do.
Yeah. On the back of the card not being good comments, like just going through these, like Andre Lima, kick leg run, Mitch Raposo, to me, with all due respect, looked like he took the fight on short notice, got his ticket to the UFC, and didn't want to lose by finish. Didn't make for a great fight. Alien Perez, Jocelyn Edwards, just not good, bad. And then that was the next fight was the Mickey Gall fight. That was a good fight. Phil Rowe, Jake Matthews, not much. Jake Matthews afterwards said, yeah, I wasn't happy with that one. Grant Dawson, Joe Slacky, Grant Dawson, 3 takedowns. That's the fight. Almeida sub and Kopylov Almeida was Kopylov, great striking in the first round. And then rounds 2 and 3, he was taking Caesar down. And since he's not a grappler, he got tired by offensively wrestling and then had to wrestle offensively so he didn't get hit while he was tired on the feet. And he's a pretty exciting guy, Kopylov. And
that's what I was really a little disappointed.
And he was going up against the glory kickboxer, and like he outstruck him in the first round and got tired out grappling him. Like, I'm not going to hold him too much, but it doesn't really help like entertainment wise when all the other fights suck, and then that happens. It's like adding on to issues.
Put it in the full perspective of like the whole card. You could you can see why fans felt like maybe more than other ones weren't just too happy with the overall product.
Yep, I'm with you. And UFC 304 desperately needs Conor McGregor. If not, the UFC will be getting its pocketbook open to either get Max Holloway in there to fight Chandler, or they will be getting a champion that is unbooked to defend their belt on 3 weeks' notice. I don't know who that would be, but they will get paid. We'll say that. So hopefully Conor stays on the card, because if he does, not a terrible pay-per-view. But if he's off it, it is tough. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the thing. McGregor's never, whatever. He's never really had great cards, but there will be something like once you already know. Depends on how those fights could go anyway. If that McGregor fight's good, it'll be like maybe one of the most popular UFC moments of the entire year, if not the. So
they can get away with it on the McGregor card.
Exactly, they can do
They
anything.
know what they're doing. Yeah, that's why Holly Holm was the co-main event of the Cowboy card, because they knew they could do anything, and they picked Holly Holm and Raquel Pennington. So that's all you need to see to know what the UFC's mindset was. So, all right, that'll be a wrap for today's card, UFC 302 in the books. And like I said at the top, if anything crazy happens with Conor, we'll talk about it next week. Hopefully, we don't have to. Hopefully, the fight's just on and there are nothing to discuss. But UFC Louisville this week, we didn't preview it. We usually don't preview cards that are after a pay-per-view. We usually talk about the pay-per-view. So if you want thoughts on that, UFC preview and UFC Best Bets will be out on Friday, and you can get thoughts on the main card and obviously betting spots as well. So that will be out, and then we'll be back next week to recap that card and discuss any other news or fights that are coming up. So that is the game plan for the future of Eight-Sided Freaks, and thank you to everyone that tuned in watching all of this one. We appreciate you.